Hi everyone, good morning, thanks for coming, it's great to be here. I was originally supposed to talk about the story of Playbuzz. I think the original title that they put in the program is How I Got Disney to Invest in My Company or something like that. But when I started working on the presentation, I figured that I'll cut the part about Playbuzz to absolute minimum and talk more about your business and your market and your careers, hopefully, and I hope it's going to be interesting. So I'm Shaul Olmert, co-founder and CEO of Playbuzz, and this is Playbuzz. I don't know if you guys are familiar with us and with our company, but we are reaching over 500 million users today, primarily through a network of partnerships. We work with over 15,000 different websites around the world, and in Germany in particular as well. So when you go to a website and you see content that is not the traditional article, but more like what you see on the screen now, more visual, more interactive, more snackable, and hopefully more fun, chances are that it was created using the Playbuzz platform. When we started the company, it was exactly 5 years ago. 5 years ago this week, we just celebrated our 5th birthday. We were 2 kids from Jerusalem and a cat. Today, 5 years later, we are closer to 200 employees in 7 different offices around the world. We are based in the United States and in London, in Brazil, in Russia, and even in Germany. We have an office in Hamburg. And during those 5 years, or when the company got started, I got a lot of advice from people. People who have more experience and more success than I had shared a lot of their insights and a lot of their tips. And I wanted to go back to some of those tips I got and give you some tips of my own, and especially give you the tips about which advice you shouldn't take. What are the things that sometimes people tell you about starting your own company or about running a company that is probably, comes from the best intentions, but may not be the best advice to follow. So let's get started. The first is, how they tell you that you should really research and learn how the best entrepreneurs in the world created their business, how the likes of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and others created their companies. So they always recommend you to read their biographies and to kind of follow their quotes and do everything they did. Well, I hate to break it to you, but statistically, most of us are not Steve Jobs. I know for a fact that I'm not, and chances are that you're not Steve Jobs as well. And even so, it's like when we hear about the history of these entrepreneurs and these companies and how they created it, it's filled with a lot of facts that can't really be verified. We don't really know if those things actually happened the way they're telling us that they happened. And even if they did, I'm not exactly sure what it means to us. So Steve Jobs is telling us that he's got a lot of inspiration from using psychedelic drugs. So, good for him, but I'm not exactly sure if this is necessarily the path that I should take in order to run my own business. So whatever worked for them is not necessarily what's going to work for you. And even more so, what's really, the only thing that these guys have in common, all those great entrepreneurs, is that they didn't follow any other entrepreneur. They, followed themselves. Instead of quoting somebody else's playbook, they wrote their own playbook. And this is what you should do too. So, my first advice is, learn everything you can about other people and be inspired by them, but don't feel like the way that they created their business is necessarily the way that's right for you. The second thing that you're always told is that you should be really, really focused. I hate this word focus. So, they always tell you that you should take all your resources and all your budget and all your attention and all your time and invest it in one thing. Don't get spread out. Don't be too lean. Like really focus on one thing and do it well. Now, I'm not saying focus is a bad thing, but going back to Apple, how 16 or 17 years ago they launched the iPod and iTunes and started selling music online. Back then, there were so many executives at Apple Computers that kept talking about this being so defocused. They said, we're a computers company. Why should we sell music and make deals with all the music labels and worry about digital downloads? It's not what we're good at. It's not our core strengths. In the personal computers market, we only own like 5 to 10%. There's so much room for growth in our core market. Why should we get spread out? But they did it, and that was the foundation or the first step in their journey to become the largest enterprise in the world. So it just comes to show you that alongside focus, you really gotta also experiment and spread out and try new things. And sometimes those experiments will blow up in the air and will really create new foundations for your company. And sometimes you're going to see all those naysayers telling you that they told you so and it's not going to work out. But essentially the trick is to really find the balance between staying focused and also experiment and explore and try new things. The first thing that I was always told, and I bet you guys heard it as well, is everyone seems to know exactly what the future is going to look like, right? Everybody has those predictions. And they tell you that in 5 years from now, it's all going to be a virtual reality, or in 10 years from now, nobody's going to use text, only voice and everything else. Well, this is great, but when you look at the crystal ball, everybody seems to see a different picture. So looking at some of those great entrepreneurs that I'm trying to follow, it's pretty amazing to see how not all of their predictions actually came true. For instance, the top executives at Microsoft totally didn't see the mobile revolution coming about. When the iPhone came out, they completely dismissed it. Even the tech reporters of the New York Times didn't see the mobile revolution happening only a year before the iPhone launched. So it just comes to show you that even those people that were able in many cases to predict the future don't really own it. And their opinion or their prediction about what's going to happen is probably as good as yours. Sometimes, by the way, I love it how they use data. They're showing you charts and showing you that the data is showing that the market is going this way or that way. Well, I did this little experiment. I went to this website called eMarketer, and I searched for graphs that are showing that mobile consumption is growing. And rest assured, I find many great pieces of data that supported this hypothesis. Then I did the opposite search. I looked for data to show me that mobile consumption is declining, and I saw an equal number of data points that are proving that as well. So even when those predictions are backed up by data, these are really only predictions. And when it comes to predicting the future, let's admit it, we are all pretty clueless. Next up, everybody's telling you that successful companies continue to be really agile, really cool, really informal, really garage-like, even when they grow. So continue to be a startup, even when you're a big company. This is, to me, it sounds very noble. I'm now in the 5th decade of my life. I'd love to say that I'm living the same lifestyle that I did when I was 17, but in reality, it doesn't really work this way. When companies start, they start in a little garage by a couple of people, and it looks really, romantic and kind of like that, and it's a lot of fun. And then, this is Hewlett-Packard, the original headquarters, if you will, of Hewlett-Packard. And a few years into the future, they look like this. Now they have many more employees. They can't fit them all in this little garage. So they move into a bigger headquarters, and it requires much more bureaucracy and much more processes in place, and things are moving slower, and there are some internal politics, but guess what? That's the price you pay for being big. So, anybody that tells you that they can maintain the same spirit and the same rules when the company grows is really being unrealistic. This is, by the way, part of the Playbuzz team, and I hope this picture shows that we have a pretty cool, beautiful people, pretty vibrant and fun atmosphere, but in all honesty, it's not the same as it was when we were just 2 people and a cat. It is very different. And when you insist on trying to behave like you're, a young teenager when you are old, this is what you look like. It's pretty pathetic. So, if you don't want to look pathetic, acknowledge your age, embrace the spirit of youth, but also try to act your age. One before last. Everybody's talking about when you start a company, you got to have a real roadmap to how you make it a profitable enterprise. So sure, we all want our companies to become profitable companies down the road, but you don't really, you can't really have all the answers in advance before you start. Look at the world's biggest companies, like this social networking company that was founded in the United States 12 years ago. When Facebook started, they had zero idea how they're going to make money. Talking about focus, they focused all of their energy, all of their resources, all of their relationships and everything else on how to create a product that will engage users and build the world's largest communication platform. When that happened, they had a very solid foundation to start creating monetization. But they didn't worry about monetization in, I don't know, the first 5 or 7 years of the company's life cycle. Today, they are pretty much flooded with money. And if back then they would have focused their attention and resources on how to make money when they just started, they would never become this big, and they would never have the infrastructure and the foundation to create the kind of monetization that they do. So really, when you start a company, focus on vision, focus on what you want to build, on how to create something that will be meaningful in the lives of consumers or businesses, or whoever your customer is. And when you reach that point, you'll probably be in a very favorable position to start generating revenue. Last but not least, everybody's telling you that when you open a new company, look at the market, and if the market already has big players in it, stay away, right? I mean, if you came out today and said that you want to start a new social network, everybody's going to laugh at you, because the market is already supposedly occupied by giants that you can't compete with. Well, challenge accepted. Look at this little company called Google. When they launched in 1996, it was, just over 20 years ago, not that long time ago, the market was considered completely dead. They, at first, find it really hard to raise money because everybody told them that they'd never be able to compete with giants such as Alta Vista, Inktomi, or Yahoo. The same Yahoo that was recently acquired for less than 1% of the value of Google. So it just comes to show you that, it's great to respect the market leaders and learn from them, but, you can always put in a new angle. When you are creating a new company, you need to disrupt an existing market. You need to come up with something that's going to change the landscape, that's going to change the foundation. When we started Playbuzz 5 years ago, we were supposedly competing with tens of thousands of publishers, content publishers all over the world that had a very established business. But we noticed that even though the market is saturated, there's one thing that's fundamentally wrong in this market. And that is the fact that even today, or back then in 2012, content still looks really the same as it did 500 years ago when print was invented. The article on digital devices is really the same structure, the same format as a print article from the very first few years of the foundation of print. And we realized that while content remained the same, the consumer has changed, and the way we consume content has changed. Because this is, admittedly, how people consume content in 2017. And if you'll give them the same form of content that used to work 500 years ago, it's not going to work in this new environment. You got to create content in a different way. So this is the mission that we took at Playbuzz, how to help people create content that doesn't look like the left side of the screen, but looks like the right side of the screen. Content that is exciting, interactive, visual, snackable, really adjusted to the ADHD Snapchat generation that we are. And thank God we didn't listen to all those people that told us that the market is saturated, because guess what? Only 4 months after we launched our product, we already had more social media traction, more shares on Facebook than Fox, the New York Times, and Yahoo combined. So not to say that it's easy and you got to be really lucky and everything else, but you're not going to learn if you're capable or not unless you're going to try. So don't be intimidated by the presence of giants. Look at those giants, see what is it that they do wrong, and what is your opportunity to do something that's going to disrupt and hopefully win over them. So just to sum it up, I don't know if my advice is any better than the advice I used to get when I started a company, but hopefully it's less generic. And, it's all about controlling your own faith, do things, follow your own gut feeling, experiment, don't necessarily stick to one thing, but be open-minded to try new things. When the business grows, you gotta embrace the fact that what made you successful at first is not necessarily what's gonna make you successful going forward, and you gotta change and spice it up and learn new tricks. When it comes to predicting the future, as the cliche says, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So don't necessarily look at all the predictions of other people, but follow your gut and try to create a new reality. When you do that, embrace the fact that you're not going to have all the answers from the get-go, so start your journey even if you don't have the full roadmap of how you're going to create the next Google or next Facebook or next Apple. And finally, don't be afraid to tap into a new market just because others have been there before and some of them were successful and some of them were not. That's all I had to say. If you are starting your own company, I wish you a lot of luck, and hopefully my advice will not make it any tougher for you. Thank you so much.